All right, hello everybody, and welcome. Good afternoon or good late morning, depending on where you're joining us from. It's my pleasure today to facilitate this webinar focused on the National Sexual Assault Kit Initiative Fiscal Year 2023 solicitation. My name is James, and I'm the Outreach and Dissemination Director for the SAKI Training and Technical Assistance Team. I wanted to go over a few housekeeping items before we get started today. If you have any technical issues during the event, we would like for you to type those into the chat and we'll get them addressed as quickly as possible. If you have questions during today's event, please type them into the Q&A function and we'll save all questions until the end of the presentation. But again, thank you all for joining us today, and I would like to introduce our presenters. Again, this is the National Sexual Assault Kit Initiative Fiscal Year 2023 solicitation webinar. Featuring Dr. Angela Williamson, the BJA Supervisor and FBI VICAP Liaison from the BJA Policy Office and Forensics Unit, and then Carrie Hendricks, also a Policy Advisor for the Forensics Unit. And without further ado, I'd like to pass things off to Ms. Carrie Hendricks.
Thank you, Chris. We also have Mila Hygo from Programs here with us today, and she'll be joining the question and answer portion this afternoon if you have anything for her this afternoon as well. So for our agenda, we're going to go over BJA and OJP overview. We're going to go over a little bit of the history of the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative program and the solicitation. And we're going to go over how to apply and review the process for that. And then we'll have questions and answers as we wrap up for the afternoon. So to get started, we're going to go over a little bit about the Office of Justice Programs. The Office of Justice Programs provides grant training, research, and statistics to the criminal justice community. OJP is one of the three grant-making components of the Department of Justice, along with the Office of Violence Against Women and the Office of Community-Oriented Policing. BJA is an office within OJP. Next slide, please. Thank you. BJA's mission is to provide leadership and services in grant administration and criminal justice policy development to support state, local, and tribal justice strategies to achieve safer communities. Next slide, please. This is our director, Carlton Moore. Director Moore was appointed by President Biden in February of 2022. He oversees all four offices that make up BJA. We are made up of a policy office, a programs office, an operations office, and the public safety officer benefits office. Here at BJA, we have 5 major strategic focus areas. Those are to improve public safety, reduce recidivism, integrate evidence-based research-driven strategies into the day-to-day operations of BJA, increase program effectiveness, and ensure organizational excellence. We accomplish these goals by investing in diverse funding streams, committing to research and the creation of tools and products to build capacity, and by building effective partnerships with our grantees. All right, I'm going to pass things off to Dr. Williamson now to give you a little bit of history of the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative project. As you know, this is a project that is near and dear to her heart, so she'll take it from here, and I'll be back with you in a little while to go over the solicitation.
Thanks, Carrie, and good afternoon, everyone. Ready for the next slide. Thanks, Chris. So I actually started at DOJ almost 10 years ago now, and my first job was to create the National Sexual Assault Kit Initiative. So I am super excited to see where it has come from and where it has grown. As you know, we are up to 6 purpose areas now, so it turned into quite a beast. But the number one objective of SAKI is to serve you all, to serve the field, to get justice for victims, and to identify the violent offenders responsible for these heinous crimes. So SAKI is the largest federally funded cold case program. Even though it is called the National Sexual Assault Kit Initiative, it is no longer just about the kits. It is about everything to do with sexually based crimes, including sexual assaults and homicides. So again, it's a really robust program. If you haven't read the solicitation yet, I know it is very long, but you are going to need to read it. But the bottom line here is that SAKI pays for everything that is necessary to work these cases. So it's inventorying, testing, tracking your SACs and other crime scene evidence, crime analysis and BICAP entry of the criteria cases. SAKI was the first grant program to allow the use of FGG, and that is something that a lot of our sites are utilizing with their SAKI grants. We pay for investigation and prosecution. That means you can fund investigators and prosecutors with your grant funds. You don't have to try and find people to work these cases without utilizing grant funds to make that happen. Victim engagement and support is always at the core of SAKI. So your victims must come first. You must have a victim advocate or a family advocate as part of your team. And we really give you a lot of help in this area. Obviously, a lot of these are cold cases and you're coming back to victims sometimes decades later. So how do you deal with that? And that's something that we at BJA and our SAKI TTA partners really help you with. And speaking of training and technical assistance, we devote millions of dollars every year to our SAKI TTA team, who are here to help you every step of the way. It's a really, really broad training and technical assistance program that has help on anything you can think of, from what is a YSTR, what is a SNP, how do you approach a victim, and how do you prioritize 400 CODIS hits that you might get back in a short time period under SAKI. We also have lawfully owed DNA, which is an area under SAKI that helps collect owed DNA samples from arrestees or convicted offenders to help solve more cases. And the bottom line, up to $2.5 million per award, and we usually have about $50 million available each year, which is simply wonderful. Next slide, Chris. So as you can see, SAKI has grown from 20 sites that we originally had in 2015 to now 82. And the dots are multiplying every year. 82 sites across 46 states. So if you're not part of Team SAKI and you're one of those states without a dot, please join. We would love to have you. And the best thing is that there are so many people working this grant now that you have so many people to call on for help. If you were just starting out, we have sites that have been with SAKI since day one, and they are always willing and able to help you with your projects and to help you get off the ground as well. So if you're just starting out, do not feel shy, do not feel overwhelmed. There is such a network with SAKI, which is really awesome. And as you can see, over $330 million has been awarded to date, which is pretty awesome for a cold case program that started with one grant for $40 million. Just some quick accomplishments. This is a running list and this is updated every quarter. But you can see that already nearly 200,000, just kits alone. No, this isn't even counting the sexually motivated homicides. So almost 200,000 kits alone have been documented under SAKI. And most jurisdictions have kits and cases dating back to the 70s all the way through to last year. So 5 decades basically worth of work is being looked at under SAKI. You will notice, the numbers at the end of this list are smaller. Well, we had that little thing called COVID, which shut our court system down for quite some time. But the other thing to be cognizant of with SAKI is that prosecutions are not the be all and end all. We are really looking at case closures, whether it's by exceptional circumstance. Given the age of these cases, a lot of the offenders are deceased. Sometimes, sadly, the victims are deceased. So again, SAKI is focused on case closure, answers for victims or their families, and justice. I just want to give some examples to hopefully inspire you to, again, read the 60-page solicitation and make the effort to apply for a grant. These are just some of the things that a few of our sites have been finding with their SAKI money and their grants. So Detroit started with about 11,000 sexual assault kits. And so over the years, they have got all the testing done and started the investigation portion and prosecution. Out of those kits were over 826 serial sex offenders. The most, I guess, alarming or reality check out of that was that they got DNA profiles hitting to 40 different states. I mean, what does that mean? Well, these perpetrators are not local, they're all over the country. And how do you address that without grant funding? And that is where really SAKI comes in with the travel, the investigation, the network with all the other agencies across the country. And this is what you will find when you work these cases. So each mugshot is a known serial offender and each line represents a victim. And you can just think of how many cases these offenders most likely did if you think of the lack of reporting, the lack of DNA in a lot of these cases. These are just the cases that were reported, that had a kit taken, that got the DNA, that got a hit in CODIS. So you know these individuals have committed a lot more crimes. And then the truly horrifying thing is that Detroit alone has 170 unknown serial sex offenders. So they know all the kits are hitting to each other. They don't know who it is. Obviously, they're doing things like VICAP investigations and FGG to try and identify these offenders. So again, this is kind of why our SAKI grantees stay with the program and come in for several grants, because you will test your kits and then you will get findings like this. So you will prosecute the ones you know, but then you will find you have often hundreds of unknown serial offenders. And how do we identify them? How do we stop them hurting other people? Example out of Cuyahoga is Nathan Ford. Some of you in that area may have heard of him, and I see some Cuyahoga people on the call today. He was one of their serial rapists who was connected to about 18 rape kits. His known span was 95 to 2004. And if it hadn't been for the SAKI grant and for testing all the kits, they would have no idea the true number of cases that he did. And this was an individual who he would target sex workers, he would target people in their homes through home invasions, a college student on campus. So truly one of those horrifying individuals who didn't stay in a lane and whose true extent of criminal activities would not have been uncovered without SAKI. Lawfully owed DNA. This is one of my favorite things that we do under SAKI. It's something that I became aware of even before I came to DOJ. When you think about CODIS, you're like, well, all the bad guys who should be in CODIS are in CODIS. Not necessarily. So CODIS has been around since about 2001. But think about that. When CODIS got implemented, do you think your jurisdiction had the time and money to go back and collect from all the offenders who legally should have contributed their DNA to CODIS based on your state DNA laws? It just never happened. And then going forward, there's just a lot of disconnect, which is what we're trying to fix under SAKI. So someone will get arrested, and is their DNA collected then? Or is it assumed it'll be collected upon conviction at trial? Or is it then assumed that it'll be collected in prison? Well, you know what they say about assumptions, and what that adds up to is most states are missing 50,000. Yes, 50,000 lawfully owed samples that should be in CODIS are not in CODIS. So this is why we fund this work under SAKI, because what's the point in testing all the evidence if a lot of the people responsible for the crimes aren't in CODIS? So we need to hedge our bets of solving cases by making sure lawfully owed DNA is in the national database. I know pinup boys here, Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy, but think about how well known they are. And their DNA was not uploaded into CODIS till 10 years after it was formed, because people started going, I wonder if Ted's DNA is in CODIS, and it wasn't. And these are the people that we all know about, and they're on a radar. But so think about the guys that have maybe done 5 bisexual assaults. Do you think anyone's thinking, I wonder if they're in CODIS? So we do a lot of work on this area under SAKI for that very reason. I'll just go through a couple of examples. So this is Rodney Hellbauer. There was a series of cases hitting to each other, a series of rape murders. And it was coined the Gypsy Hill serial rapist, but they were just scene-to-scene hits, forensic hits in CODIS. No one knew who it was. Well, it turns out it was Rodney, and he had been in prison most of his life for sexual offenses. He should have and could have had his DNA collected legally, but it wasn't. He was just one of those people who slipped through the cracks. He was transferred over to Oregon for another crime, another charge that he was facing. They collected his DNA. It hit to this Gypsy Hill serial killer series in CODIS. So finally, they knew who killed those girls. But there had been a mentally ill woman who had confessed to one of those crimes, and she had been sitting in prison for 30 years. all for, I say, the bargain price of a $30 buccal swab. So why lawfully owed DNA is very important. Cuyahoga was our first SAKI grantee to come in for a lawfully owed DNA grant. And it was kind of spurred by this individual, Anthony Sewell, who was one of the Craigslist serial killers. I know there's a few out there. But he was found with at least 11 women's remains in his residence. His DNA had been taken. He'd been in prison for some rapes. His DNA was collected. It never made it into CODIS. Again, checks and balances. It just didn't make it into CODIS. If it had of, he would have hit to other rapes and probably wouldn't have been paroled and gone on to kill those women. So that was kind of got people questioning in Cuyahoga what was going on, who else might be missing. So Cuyahoga is really the Cleveland area and just surrounding. And they figured out with their SAKI grant, it's actually closer to 16,000 samples just in their one small area are missing from CODIS. So with their SAKI grant, they started collecting, and just from a subset of about 1,800 offenders, they collected and got 70 CODIS hits, including multiple murders and sexual assaults. A lot of those hits hit to DNA from kits that they tested before and had no answer to who had been responsible for those crimes. So it really proves the whole point of evening out the playing field for getting DNA matches by collecting your lawfully owed if you're also testing your evidence. So right now we have 10 jurisdictions collecting lawfully owed DNA. And if you want to be shocked, just out of those 10 jurisdictions, they've already calculated that there are 312,000 owed DNA samples. So if this is something that interests you and you've addressed your sexually motivated crimes in your jurisdiction or most of the way through doing that, definitely consider coming in for a lawfully owed DNA grant as well. And will DNA solve every case? For those of you who don't know me, DNA is my background, my area of expertise. I love it, but it's not going to solve every case. It will probably solve about 50% of cases. Obviously, DNA is not present in every kit or in every piece of crime scene evidence. You're not going to get a hit in CODIS, and FGG is not going to be helpful all the time. So this is why we started a partnership with the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. And this was formalized in 2017. And then effective in 2018, we made VICAP entry of criteria cases under SAKI mandatory if you get a grant. Next slide, Chris. So if you're not familiar with VICAP, if you've never used them, maybe you've watched the show Criminal Minds, that is VICAP. I've never watched it, but it is the show about VICAP. They coordinate information between law enforcement agencies to investigate, track, and apprehend serial violent offenders. So VICAP is pretty much the MO version of CODIS. So it's where it's a database and a service. So it's a database and they have crime analysts as well. So you put your case in, you maintain ownership of your case. The FBI does not steal your case. You put it in their system. And the great thing with sexual assaults, even though it sounds funny to say great thing, is that typically you have a living victim who can tell you all that really useful investigative information about the perpetrator. Tattoos, what they smelt like, words they may have said to them, weapons, vehicles, all that kind of stuff can go into VICAP. And that can be used to search on other cases and try and find similar cases, again, based on behavior, MO, as opposed to just DNA. VICAP is for solved and unsolved cases because your known offender could be the stranger rapist in another jurisdiction. So all eligible criteria cases worked under purpose areas 1, 2, 4, and 6 must be entered into VICAP. You are allowed to budget in your application and utilize grant funds for these activities. So it's not like we're saying you must do this on your own. We will give you the funding to complete this activity. And we provide a lot of VICAP training from the VICAP analysts themselves. They train you specifically on how to use the system. Just an example, so a lot of people think VICAP is for matching cases across state lines and things like that, but often it's handy within the own state as well. And here's an example from Texas from 2 agencies that weren't that geographically distant. But like, a lot of agencies, they're focused on their own cases, and that is not a criticism. So this is why VICAP's important. There was a sexual assault and when the suspect had filmed the sexual assault on his phone. Then he was arrested for another crime, and it was not a sexual assault, but it was another violent offense that qualified for entry into VICAP. And when they looked at his phone, they found the sexual assault. So all this information was entered into VICAP and matched the two and identified him as the rapist in the sexual assault. So a really neat example on how the system can work even at the local level. All right, and I'm going to hand back to Carrie, who's going to go through a little bit more detail what is in the solicitation, what the funding can provide for you, and I'm sure I will butt in with little bits of wisdom along the way. Thanks, Carrie.
Yes, thank you. So Dr. Williamson obviously gave you a really great overview of our program, but this time we're going to go through a little bits of the nuts and bolts of the solicitation. We're going to highlight all of the purpose areas, and this year we have 6 purpose areas, which is really big news, and much credit to Dr. Williamson for purpose area 6. And so I will let her speak about that one in particular, but we're going to kick it off and get started with purpose area 1. Next slide, please. So this year, as with most years, we have approximately $50 million available to us. And purpose area 1 funds, generally we make awards of about $2.5 million each. Purpose area 2 funds are about $1 million each. Purpose area 3 run around 1.5. Purpose area 4 are also about 1.5. Purpose area 5 is our new sustainability area, and it is about 1 million. And then our new purpose area 6 is also 2.5 million. All right, so purpose area 1 is our most comprehensive purpose area. Think of this one as sort of the original SAKI program. It is the most comprehensive purpose area that we allow the most activities under. If you're starting from ground zero, this is the purpose area you want to apply for. If you're just taking sort of stock of how many kits you may have as a backlog, or if you have an idea of you've already inventoried how many kits you have, but you need to test those, this is the purpose area you would start with. If you want a research program, in addition to testing your kits, you would start here. This is for also the larger jurisdictions, because again, it is a larger fund for bigger jurisdictions. We also want you to follow the BJ model, so everybody has to inventory and track your SACs as well. We want you to follow a multidisciplinary team approach. Everybody has to hire and designate a site coordinator. We want you to create and continuously meet with that multidisciplinary team. That is a really important part of what we do here at the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative Project. We really feel like that is a big part of the reform and overseeing these cases, is seeing that done as a multidisciplinary approach. Obviously, you're going to enter your cases into VICAP. And then this purpose area also allows you to do testing of secondary evidence, YSTR, FGG, and lots of other fun things as well. Angela, do you have anything that you wanted to add to this one?
No, this is, again, as Carrie said, this is the original SAKI. This is the most robust, my favorite word this afternoon, but this is the really all-encompassing area. So if you think you have a lot of different activities to do, this is the area for you. But again, you just have to follow the SAKI model.
Yeah, so if you've got a really big project on your hands, this is the purpose area that you really want to take a look at. All right, Chris, next slide, please. Purpose area 2 is very similar in nature to purpose area 1, but it is designed for small agencies, particularly those that are in rural or tribal areas. And so we really wanted this to mimic purpose area 1. You need to do very similar activities with it. We still want you to follow the SAKI model. We still want you to inventory and track your sexual assault kits. We still want you to work as a multidisciplinary team, but we know that smaller agencies have a more difficult time sort of meeting all of those demands. And so this purpose area is designed to allow for some more flexibility for smaller agencies, particularly in rural and tribal areas.
Yeah, but if you are thinking of this area, please take a look at our SAKI TTA website. First up, to see if you already are covered by a statewide site. Because if you are, then we just reach out to us if you don't know who that is, and we will make introductions, and it might be easier for them to make sure you're covered rather than coming in for your own separate grant, because we know applying for grants is not easy. So again, if you are covered by a statewide site, which there's 26, I believe now, I've lost count, but there's a lot across the country. If you're just not sure, feel free to reach out and we will help you out there. Not to discourage you from applying, but again, if you're already covered, then that might be a lot easier for you.
Exactly. I was going to say the exact same thing. And I think, too, one of the things that we wanted to mention, if you're interested in Purpose Area 2, because it can be such a heavy lift and the grant application has gotten quite lengthy, and we understand that it is not the easiest of grant applications. If you're interested in Purpose Area 2, reach out to Dr. Williamson or I, and we will pair you with another Purpose Area 2 applicant so that you can get some feedback on how to structure your application. So Purpose Area 3. Dr. Williamson obviously gave you a great overview of lawfully owed DNA. And as she mentioned, on average, each state has upwards of 50,000 missing samples. So that alone tells you that this is super important work that we need to focus on. This particular purpose area is for grantees or other applicants that have addressed your initial backlog of sexual assault kits. So if you can either you've already had a sexual assault kit initiative grant and you've made progress toward that initial backlog, or you've somehow otherwise dealt with that in your jurisdiction, you can apply for this funding and look to address lawfully owed DNA in your jurisdiction. Some of the high points that we want you to know is that handling your census or figuring out who owes you lawfully owed DNA in your jurisdiction is a very heavy lift, generally speaking. So you want to make sure that you factor that in to your application. We want you to designate a DNA collection coordinator because that is a very important position, especially as it relates to the collection of census information and then the collection of the DNA samples after the fact. It absolutely must be a multidisciplinary effort. It cannot be done siloed. It will not be successful. So this is a very difficult purpose area, I think. I think it is heavy, very important work. And so if you're going to try it, it is worthwhile, but definitely make sure that you're doing it in a multidisciplinary fashion with strong stakeholders so that you're successful in that endeavor.
Yeah, this is a purpose area where you have to be very good friends with lawyers. Legal people must be on your team. You cannot get sued, and you must ensure that everything is legally, lawfully owed. So this is where make friends. Carrie is a lawyer. Make friends with the Carries of the world in your jurisdiction.
Yes, that's a very important piece, and sometimes that is the most difficult part because in many states, you'll have legislation that is directly applicable, or sometimes that legislation, in Kentucky in particular, there was a legislation passed and then it was repealed, and it is particularly confusing. And so you have to have a lawyer on board in order to guide your census collection. So please pay particular attention to that. All right, Chris, next slide, please. Thank you. All right, purpose area 4 is a more advanced purpose area, and it's primarily for applicants that have also dealt with their initial backlog and are now dealing with large numbers of codicits that have resulted from either the testing of their initial backlog or that for jurisdictions that have also somehow otherwise dealt with their backlog and just have large numbers of sexually motivated crimes that they need to deal with. And so this purpose area goes beyond basic sexual assault kit testing and allows you to get into the more advanced forensic techniques. It allows you to support cold case units, which is a big deal across jurisdictions because funds are badly needed for that out in local communities. You can work sexually motivated crimes. We recently expanded to allow you to work sexually motivated homicides as well. You can work to interview and investigate convicted sexually motivated perpetrators in order to gain information on additional offenses committed. That was a bit of information that we can't speak today. We added last year. And I think, Angela, what else did you want to add for that?
Yeah, there's some really cool projects. I'm just going to call out a couple of our sites. I saw the Texas Rangers are on and Cuyahoga's on. Cuyahoga's doing this really neat project called GOLD. I will not butcher their acronym, but basically they got their 20 most wanted DNA profiles. So these are truly horrible offenders linked to SAKI cases, but they don't know who they are. And they're doing FGG on all those cases. Texas Rangers are doing something similar where they are looking at profiles that are in CODIS related particularly to rape series or to sexually motivated serial killers, but they're not hitting to a known offender, and they're doing FGG and familial DNA searches on those. So yeah, you can get really, it's kind of the cool purpose area where you've done the core components of SAKI and you're like, but we can solve these cases if we have more time and resources. So that's really what purpose area 4 is for.
All right, purpose area 5. Purpose area 5, we have lovingly referred to as our graduation purpose area. This purpose area exists to allow existing or previous SAKI grantees which have addressed their unsubmitted kits and their downstream activities to apply for one final SAKI project that is focused on sustainability. And so that basically means that you've done all of the hard work under SAKI. You've tested the bulk of your kits, you've hired investigators, you've done all of the hard work, and you are now trying to make some sustainability changes to make sure that this hard work lasts for generations to come. And so some permissible activities that are allowable under this particular purpose area are the enhancement or creation of policies and procedures that allow for things such as law enforcement agencies to submit all previously unsubmitted kits, to require an annual statewide inventory of all SACs in possession of law enforcement, to require a SAC tracking system, require all qualifying sexual assaults and sexually motivated homicides to be entered into a timely manner into VICAP, mandatory training for law enforcement, the creation and regular convening of multidisciplinary working groups, all of the things that we regularly do under SAKI, but creation of policies and procedures that will ensure that those endure after the grant funding has gone away. And now I will pass it over to Dr. Williamson so she can share the wonderful news that is Purpose Area 6.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie. A lot of people who know me know that I've been pushing for this for quite some time. So Purpose Area 6 is the National Cold Case Initiative, where we're expanding the use of SAKI funds to other violent crimes that do not have a sexual assault component. And at first you may be like, this woman is crazy. Why would we do this? Well, there's a couple of reasons, but first I'll just say, in order to be eligible for Purpose Area 6, it comes with strings attached. This is not negotiable, and this is why. We're using SAKI money for this. We cannot take away from the core activities of SAKI to fund this area. This is only for existing SAKI grantees or previous SAKI grantees that have addressed the bulk of their sexually motivated crimes, because that is the intent of SAKI, obviously. But this is to add on to solving more of these cases. And you're like, hang on, how is that going to happen? Well, before I get to the next slide, Chris, I just want to say one more thing. Think about the National Cold Case Initiative as essentially Purpose Area 1, but for your other violent cold case crimes. And I think I've got the slides in order. The next slide shows why I think this purpose area is so important. So here's what we're seeing under SAKI. Across multiple SAKI sites, not just urban areas or rural areas, we are finding that approximately 65% of the offenders linked to sexual assault kits have prior convictions for other non-sexual violent offenses. So think about that. The majority of people committing sexually motivated crimes have convictions for other violent offenses, not for rapes. Then one other statistic that is on our website, if you want to take a look, over 78% of sexual assault kit DNA CODIS hits to serial offenders are to violent serial offenders as opposed to convicted serial sexual offenders. So this is hard evidence of what I think most people in the field have known for years, that if you're a violent offender, you don't stay in one neat lane. We cannot silo sexual assault to find these offenders. If you're a violent offender, you're committing rapes, you're committing murders, you're committing kidnappings, armed robberies, a slew of violent offenses. So to me, and thankfully to leadership at DOJ and everyone who signs off on this, we really see this as yet another piece of addressing the people responsible for these crimes. It's to look at all violent crimes in a jurisdiction. And yes, you'll solve a multitude of crimes, but you'll also get these offenders off the street and you'll prevent additional victimization. Okay, Carrie said she just lost audio. Carrie, do you want to text if you're back? Do you mean you can't hear or we can't hear you?
I think I'm back.
You're
Can
back.
everybody hear me okay? Okay, all right, good news.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm sure there'll be lots of questions about Nikki at the end. We will be here for that in the Q&A. Carrie's just going to go through I'm going to say it's the boring stuff, but the stuff you need to pay attention to get the money to do the good stuff.
Yes. So this last part's going to be a little dry, but I want you all to pay super close attention to it because we've lost a couple of good applications last year because people did not know that there were 2 deadlines that you have to pay close attention to. So while it's going to be quite dry for the rest of the afternoon until we get to the Q&A portion, it's very important information. So please hang with me. So the application submission process is a 2-step process. The applicant must submit by the grants.gov deadline the required application for federal assistance standard form, the SF424, and a disclosure of lobbying activities form when they register in grants.gov. To register in grants.gov, the applicant will need to ensure that its system for award management registration is current. That grants.gov due date is April 4th at 8:59 p.m. I have no idea why in the world it is 8:59 p.m. and not like 11:59, but it is 8:59 p.m. and there is absolutely no wiggle room on that. Unless it is a systems failure on our part, unless something happens on the government side, there is no wiggle room. So make sure that you do that by 8:59 p.m. on April 4th. Next slide, please. The applicant must then submit a full application, including all attachments into Just Grants. To be considered timely, that application must be received in Just Grants by the Just Grants deadline. So the Just Grants due date is April 11th at 8:59 p.m. And so again, it's very important you have to hit both of those deadlines in order for your application to be considered timely. All right, just a little bit more so that you can see. Your grants.gov deadline is April 4th, 8:59. Your closing date is April 11th at 8:59. And if you have not already started on your applications, you are behind. Get started, please. All right. So here at OJP, we screen the applications to ensure they meet the basic minimum requirements prior to conducting peer review. The applications that meet the basic minimum requirements will be evaluated for technical merit by peer review panelists. That basically means that we hire contracted professionals to review your applications. We do not here at OJP decide who scores the highest or who gets the funding. Those are done by the peer reviewers. The peer reviewers will review your proposal abstract, your narrative, and your budget forms. And although the specific requirements may vary, the following are common requirements that are applicable to all of our solicitations. The application must be submitted by an eligible type of applicant, so you need to pay attention to that as you're reviewing the solicitation. The application must request funding within the programmatic funding constraints, and the application must be responsive to the scope of the solicitation. And so, again, I know the solicitation is quite long and complicated. It's incredibly important that you read it anyway. Next slide, please. All right, other common application elements are the indirect cost rate agreement, the NEPA, the dreaded NEPA checklist, we all love it, the financial management system of internal controls questionnaire, the disclosure of duplicate cost items, the letter of commitment that you may have from stakeholders, the DOJ certifications regarding lobbying, debarment, suspension, and other responsibility matters, drug-free workplace requirement, accreditation documentation if you need it, and lists of key personnel. All right, required for purpose areas 1 and 2, you must disclose all federal grant-funded sexual assault kit testing projects, including any funding of crime lab that you may receive from BJA for the purposes of testing or processing SAK evidence, and you must explain why additional funding is necessary. In addition, you must describe how you will document your SAKI funding, how that will be coordinated and tracked separately from any other funding that you may receive, including our CBER funding, and not duplicate other current grant-funded projects. Your certification of inventory SACs, 25% of your funding will be released for initial planning, and the remainder of your funds will be released once your certification is completed. For purpose area 6, you will also do a certification of your inventory very similar to purpose area 1 and 2 as well. All right, the peer reviewers are going to be looking at these various components, and these are the weighted percentages that they will give to each section. The statement of review, statement of problem, and description of the issue gets 15%. The project design and implementation gets 40%. Capabilities and competencies gets 25%. The plan for collecting data for the solicitations performance reviews gets 10%, and your budget evaluated for completeness and cost effectiveness gets 10% as well. You will see further breakdown and details regarding the review criteria for all purpose areas on page 33 of the solicitation. All right, you can receive training available at this link for Just Grants if you need some assistance with the Just Grants on how to register or how to use the Just Grant system. And the support desk is where you can go if you need help registering, or if you run into problems submitting your application, you'll use this Just Grant support at usdoj.gov or the 833 number. All right, now we can take all your questions about the National Cold Case Initiative. Because I bet that's what they're going to be about. I was going to say, I bet that's what they're going to be.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Carrie. Really good information there. I know Angela addressed a couple of questions directly in the Q&A function.
If anyone's wondering what a BICAP criteria case is, there's information in the solicitation rather than me telling you off the cuff and missing one thing. It's not complicated, but it's just a list of criteria cases, and we've given you links in the solicitation.
Darwin Hudson asked about slides being available after the webinar. Yes, this is recorded, so the recording will be available, but then also a PDF of the slide deck. We do ask a couple of days lead time to get that out to you guys, but it will be out on the SAKI TPA website, but then also disseminated through email. Question. No other questions at this time.
Yeah, they're coming in the Q&A, Chris.
There they go. They all popped in at once for me.
Yeah.
I did.
I see one that says for purpose area 6 with a colon and does not have a follow-on question. So Laura, if you don't mind elaborating.
Laura, come on.
There it goes.
There she goes.
When does the inventory have to be completed for purpose?
Oh, I meant to jump in on that. So it's the same as purpose area 1. You'll come in with an approximate, and then you complete it like you did for purpose area 1. 6 months would be like our goal, like it is for purpose area 1, and obviously there'll be a withholding on your funding until you get that part done.
Great question. Another question, if an existing SAKI site already has a site coordinator but has been awarded purpose area 6 funds, will that site need an additional site coordinator for cold cases?
Is your site coordinator already really overwhelmed, which I'm going to say they probably are? Yes, yeah. We really look at every purpose area as you need its own separate site coordinator unless you have a rock star miracle worker. It's a lot of work for a site coordinator. So we would strongly encourage you to have an additional site coordinator.
Laura, follow-on question, until the estimate is done or the certified inventory, and parentheses funding being withheld.
Yeah, so same as purpose area 1, your funds are withheld until it's certified. Not all your funds, a percentage. Just to clarify for people who are like, what? That we give you enough money is released to get work up and running, and then we release the rest of it once it's certified.
Okay, one more from Laura. Is it possible for us to only focus on murders? It would be difficult for us to collect information on all unsolved violent crimes.
All right, Laura, I'm cutting you off, but you can submit a proposal talking about that. You are absolutely welcome to do that. That is perfectly fine.
Hey, Audrey asks, did I understand correctly that in order to apply for Purpose Area 6, you have to already be a SAKI grantee?
Yes, it's not because we're trying to be mean. It's because this is with SAKI funds. This is the first year. We are hoping to expand this, but for the first year, this is how we launched Lawfully Owed DNA. When we first launched that, we said you have to be an existing grantee or had a previous SAKI grant. So yes, for now, but stay tuned for future iterations to see how we evolve.
Thanks, Angela. Michael asks, you said to get a lawyer for Lawfully Owed DNA. Would that be a prosecutor, or if not, what kind of lawyer would you suggest?
I'm gonna let the lawyer answer this one.
I would recommend that you get someone who is abreast of probably civil law. I mean, it would definitely wouldn't hurt for it to be a prosecutor, but you want somebody who is going to be familiar with whatever legislation you have surrounding lawfully owed DNA. That's likely going to be somebody possibly at your Attorney General's office, or potentially if you have an attorney at your Department of Corrections, that's probably somebody good to go to as well.
Question. Liz asks, I know we apply under more than one purpose area, but can we also apply for additional funding under each purpose area? For example, we're a statewide initiative and one of our sites is interested in Purpose Area 6, but we are still needs focused on areas 1 and 4. You
can. I'm just going to say, do you want to be doing performance metrics reports and tracking all of that? So just meet as a team and think about what is feasible for you to handle, because that's going to be a lot, right? So, and again, keep in mind, these all get peer reviewed. So if you have a need, yes, you're welcome to apply. I would just say, really think about what you can handle in terms of oversight and managing, and where it might get a little bit too much. So just think about it, but you're welcome to.
Would those be separate applications? Liz followed up with.
They sure would be. That probably changes your mind. Yes, remember this is competitive, so they all have to be separate. And also remember that we have different peer reviewers for different purpose areas as well. So peer reviewer for Lawfully Owed isn't going to know that you put in a great application for Purpose Area 1.
Oh, I want to touch on that a little bit as well. I'm sorry, Chris, just one more thing. I meant to mention that when I was talking about the purpose areas during peer review. The peer reviewers do not necessarily know, especially you previous grantees, that you guys have previous funding. So always when you're doing your project narratives, at least do a little bit of a summary for the peer reviewers about your previous projects. And then, do a little summary and then hit on what else needs to be done and why you're applying for additional funding, because it is not, you can't assume that they're going to know about your project, because most of these people are going to be completely unfamiliar with the work that you've done. So take a little bit of time and do a summary of the good work that you've done. Sorry, Chris, go ahead.
You're fine. Thanks for adding on. Lori asks, if you only have a SAKI grant for lawfully owed DNA, can you also apply for Purpose Area 6?
Yes, because you're an existing SAKI grantee, and the only way you got a lawfully owed grant is if you provided evidence that you already addressed unsubmitted sexual assault kits in your jurisdiction. So yes. I had to think that through in my head, but yes.
Michael asks, what other MDT team members would you recommend for Purpose Area 6?
It's really the same
standard.
Yeah, Purpose Area 1,
Angela.
except you probably will want a victim advocate and a family advocate, because you'll probably be dealing a lot more with murders. So you'll want someone to help the surviving family members, as opposed to, I don't want to say just a victim advocate, but you'll probably want both as part of your team.
Okay, Thomas asked, for the Purpose Area 6 inventory, are we documenting total number of cases, i.e. homicide, missing persons, unidentified human remains across the state, or is this an evidence-based inventory like physical evidence recovery kit?
I think the latter will be too hard, particularly, obviously, I know Thomas from Virginia. I would inventory all your cases, and then you will have to figure out what actually does have evidence. But to be certified, we would just have an inventory of your total number of cases.
Okay. Comment from Mark says, thanks, Angela, helped write the New York Danny solicitation and then write the 2016 SAKI grant from them. So he's in agreement that it could solve many more cases under Purpose Area 6 and excited to submit a final grant or go for Purpose Area 6. Thanks for the
All righty. Oh boy. We're going to have a lot to look at this year.
All right. Troy asks, is it possible for two agencies to make a joint proposal, for example, a city agency in conjunction with a county agency?
Absolutely. Yes. One will need to be, you'll need to take a look at the qualifying agencies that can apply, and one of you will need to be a lead applicant and one would be a sub-awardee, but absolutely. And Mila, obviously hop in here if I go astray.
No, that was exactly right. That was exactly what I was going to say, is that the partner agency would just have to be listed as a sub-grantee.
Right. Being a statewide site, do we have to cover the entire state, or could we include just a portion of the state or specific geographic area?
Laura, I assume you're talking about Purpose Area 6 again. You could define it differently than what you have for your existing grants. That is up to you.
Right. Can we use the same multidisciplinary group that we currently have in place for Purpose Area 1 and 3 for Purpose Area 6, or do we need a new multidisciplinary team for Purpose Area 6?
You're probably going to need partially new, because if you're like most agencies, I'm going to guess that your SVU is very separate to your homicide unit. And if you're working a lot of homicides, you will want those investigators and that unit closely, really leading a lot of the work. So think about that.
Okay, Thomas followed up. Also, when it says that 75% of downstream activities must be completed for Purpose Area 6, does this mean that the applicant is in the investigation stage for 75%, or prosecution and investigation for 75% of cases identified?
Prosecution and investigation.
And Purpose Area 6 have subrecipients?
Yes. It would be the same for all purpose areas.
Can separate entities in the same state apply individually? I think we kind of addressed this one.
Yes, yes, they can.
All right, a couple more. Brad Campbell asks, if you're in a city jurisdiction in a state that has tested your SACs through a statewide grant, can you apply for your own funding to investigate new cases that come out of statewide SAKI testing? If yes, which purpose area would you suggest applying under?
All right, I had to think about this one. I think I get it, and I think you'd want to look at Purpose Area 4. I'm interpreting this as that you want to do more follow-up investigation and prosecution, so Purpose Area 4.
Yes, that'd definitely be the situation he's referring to. But since I will hush.
All right, last question for now. Sherry asks, or says that we have tested all of our untested SACs. We are currently testing partially tested and are continuing to investigate from both sets of SACs. We know we have a large number of cold case violent crimes that aren't in CODIS. Are we considered 75% complete since we have tested all of unsubmitted kits?
So I'm a little confused because you're currently testing partially tested, which we consider unsubmitted. So technically, no. And you can follow up with me. I don't want to give a flippant answer just based on something in a chat box. So definitely feel free to reach out and we can talk more.
Thank you, Angela. That is all the questions we have at this time. We're a couple of minutes till the top of the hour. So at this time, we would like your feedback on some poll questions from the SAKI TTA side of things. Let us know what you thought of the webinar. This is important for us to report back to BJA on the webinar performance. But while those poll questions are up for the next minute or so, anyone, Angela, Carrie, anyone else from BJA, do you guys have any final thoughts you'd like to offer?
I think another question just snuck in. Oh, no. Just, I cannot say enough. You cannot leave this to the last minute. And Carrie was right. If you haven't started now, you are behind. If you don't start a month out from the deadline, you will not make it. It is not easy, but please reach out. If you've never applied for one before, feel free to reach out to us. We can pair you with an existing grantee who's doing similar work. They are lovely people who are always ready and willing to share their applications with you and give you advice. So again, Carrie, Neela, and I have zero control. If you missed the deadline and it wasn't because of our system, there is no mercy. That's the only way to say it. And it's not from us. We cannot plead your case. We tried last year and got told, no, we don't make that decision. So don't miss the deadline. We typically fund 90% of applications, and new jurisdictions, it's very rare that a new jurisdiction does not get funded. So you've got a really good chance. And again, please, we don't want anyone wasting their time on Purpose Area 6. If you're not sure whether you qualify or not, please reach out to us. It's a lot of work to do an application. And again, this is just a start. We see this continuing and expanding. So if you're not sure whether you qualify, don't put hours and weeks into an application unless you check with us.
Absolutely. And please don't wait to submit your application the day of. That's what I used to do as a grant writer. I've been in all of your shoes before. I was also a practitioner who did a lot of appellate work. And if you've not raced to FedEx to get your appellate brief stamped to be timed, timely submitted, it's, you're not really an appellate lawyer. But don't do that. Don't do that. Don't wait to the last minute. Something could go wrong, and we don't want to miss any of you or any of the good work that you're doing, or have a delay in the work that you're doing because you've waited too long. So please, by all means, submit early. And thank you for all of the work that you're doing across the country.
Join Team SAKI. We're a happy bunch. Everyone likes each other.
We are like one big, slightly dysfunctional family, but we all get along really well.
I see one quick question. This is competitive. This is why. This is not formula where you are just going to get handed money. This is competitive. You really have to plead your case to get funded to peer reviewers. So not to us, but to your peers.
Right.
Okay, email us or call us with any questions. We are here to help you all.
Yep. Thank you so much, Angela and Carrie, for all the helpful information today. And thank you, everyone, for attending. One more question came through about a copy of the presentation. So yeah, the recording itself and then a PDF of the slide deck will be posted to the SAKI TTA website, but then also disseminated through email. So again, thank you all for your time and attention today. We really appreciate it and hope you have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.